have hijacked the host seat, and I will be interviewing the one, the only David Chambers.
What people are coming for is an energetic experience.
Yes, there's a coaching container and there's a professionalism here, but there's also a degree of friendship and care.
I want your life to be better. You know, we've had a conversation, we've got a connection.
So it sounds like you obviously get it.
Welcome to the Authentic Man podcast. I am your host, David Chambers. This is a podcast for men who want more and less from life. More deep connection, more emotional intelligence, more self-awareness, and more great sex. And less heartache, less conflict, less overthinking, and less stress. Creating dating lives, sex lives, and relationships that are incredible and authentic. My deepest goal is that you, the listener, can take away what you hear in this podcast and apply it to your life so that you can experience greater happiness, transformational growth, deeper relationships, and profound sexual intimacy. I believe that as men, we are capable of so much more depth than we are shown or led to believe. So join me as we get deep into this.
All right, everyone. Welcome to the Authentic Man podcast, where I have hijacked the host seat, and I will be interviewing the one, the only David Chambers on all things sexuality, conscious relationship, and men's work. I am your temporary host, Tyson Adams, a trauma-informed men's coach, somatic bodyworker, and psychedelic facilitator. I've been on the show once before on episode 127 titled Sex Transmutation, Mindful Masturbation, and Developing a Profound Connection to Yourself. Here we are, round two, with the hot seat switched. Hope you guys enjoy it. David, welcome to your own show. How you doing today?
I'm good, man. I'm good. This is a first for me to be interviewed on my own podcast. So it's a new sensation, actually, for me to be on this side on my own podcast. Yeah. It's like, I don't need to introduce myself.
Yeah. And what's really interesting is that that podcast that we recorded, I mean, this was what, I don't know, maybe 6 months ago. So many people have reached out to me about it. And so this is one of those things where I was like, thank you. I just want to say thank you for having me on the show. It was a beautiful conversation. Really appreciated it. And yeah, I'm really grateful. So thank you.
No, thank you, man. Thank you for the show. It was a lot of fun to record. It's great to have you back here with me, interviewing me.
Yeah. So what's alive for you? I mean, what right now has you just juiced up, and where are you at just in life? Maybe not even in business, but in life. What has you juiced up?
Mm-hmm. Well, what's really alive in life now is the future, future of me and my partner. We're having conversations about creating a family, what we want that to look like, where we want to be in the world, what we want family life to look like, what's non-negotiable in our relationship, and, all those kind of questions that fill me with incredible amounts of fear. The whole conversation around having children, creating a family, it throws up a lot of it throws up a lot of fear around commitment, even though I'm in a committed relationship, but like that next level of commitment, which is like children, which is like forever. Fatherhood, because though my father is present in my life, he's not present in the ways that I would have loved him to be in my life. So that really throws up a lot. And I guess, recently what's really kind of come up for me a lot around having children is like the sexual commitment and the kind of there's been present necessarily in my relationship, kind of sexual freedom, but it's almost like alarm bells are going off in my head. That's like, you have children, you're never going to be able to sleep with other women ever again. And it's like, ding, 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 ding. And I'm like, oh shit, panicking, trying not to panic, trying to come back to myself. And that's what's really alive.
Wow. That's a lot. I feel that right here in the heart center. Woo. Wow. Okay. So that feels real big. I'm just curious, what do those conversations look like? Like when you guys are having those conversations, do you have dedicated space and time that you sit down and have those types of conversations? Because I watch you on Instagram, I listen to the podcast. I feel like you're a very intentional man, and you and your partner have these intentional practices. So what does it look like to plan family and that commitment to the life journey together? Because no matter whether somebody gets married or not married, when you have a child with somebody, that's a commitment for forever. That in the way that I look at it. So I'm just curious what that looks like for you guys.
Yeah, I guess for us, what it looks like, planning to have a family and having those conversations is, like you said, intentional conversations, like planning time. Like we already have in our relationship a time every month. We take like 2 to 3 hours to talk about our relationship, to talk about the quality of our relationship. We call it our relationship learnings. That's what it's become. It started off as our relationship review, and then we were like, that sounds a bit too businessy. So we'll ask questions. It'll be, the standard format for us is like, what's gone well over that previous month? What's not gone so well? Which is the question you're really afraid of, really, when you're there. What would you like more of? What would you like to change? When did you feel most loved? What can I do to be a better partner to you? How can I love you more? And then we set an agenda. So around some of the family conversations, there's been like adding things into the agenda beforehand. Like, okay, so next month we're going to talk about finances. What finances do we need to have in place? So we want to have in place before we start. I guess the question isn't what we need to have in place. It's like, what would we like to have in place, right? There's conversations around, like, say my partner, she's got the coil in. So she's like, okay, when do we want to do that? What dates do we want to do that? Like questions around, okay, do you want me to be there with you? Do you not want me to be there with you? How do we want to celebrate that? When do we kind of start officially kind of trying? Like all those kind of conversations are kind of conversations we've had. And, some of them has been difficult, challenging. Some of them we've seen resistance. Like I definitely see I had resistance to some of those conversations and not wanting to have them. Like putting them off for long periods of time as well. And I guess there's the conversations also are, sometimes they're really light, you might be sitting in a restaurant or walking and you see like a guy carrying his baby with his partner. And you're like, I hope we look like that, I want to be doing shit like that. Or we were in holiday in Costa Rica and I think we watched this man. Oh, this was so beautiful actually, just remembering this. We were on the beach and it was like sun was setting and he had his baby on the ground in front of him, like what do we call them when they're doing that? Crawling, right? And the waves were coming in and going out. And it was quite gentle, but the size of the baby was enough that when the waves come in, it would get up to like his kind of chin level, right? When he's, especially if he's crawling along the ground. And the father was like there with him. So when the water hit him, he would just lift him up a little bit. So he got to experience like the water touching him, and he started to, the baby started to learn like, okay, when the water's coming, I should stop and put my head up, right? So you saw the baby like learn in the moment as it's happening. We also watched him, me and also watched him for a good 15 or 20 minutes on the beach, just watching this man with the baby. And we were kind of commentating, also was like, if that's a mother, she's probably not going to like be so close to the edge of the baby's face being like drowned in water. But the father was so attentive and watching, and like there was even a moment where he literally only lifted the baby up for like 2 inches and then put him back down. So he just got used to being with the water, that the water was safe and stuff like that. So it's like seeing those sorts of things and being like, yeah, that's what we want to be doing with our, our babies and so forth. And so, yeah, but they can be really easy. Sometimes they're really simple and easy. Sometimes they're really difficult and painful. There's a lot of talking about our own childhoods as well, which has happened consistently for our relationships, and also talking about some of our fears as well around like, fatherhood, motherhood. You can't avoid those. And in a way, it's really healthy to talk about the fears, actually. I think the fears are a really important part. I have my own fears about fatherhood because my father wasn't really around. He's like in my life, but he's emotionally not really present. And I always get the sense of him, he never really wanted to have children, though he's got 5 of them.
Wow.
Which is always hilarious to me. What I think is my dad liked having sex. He liked having sex, and he liked being with women who were very nurturing and caring and loving. But I don't think he really wanted to have kids, but he wasn't particularly good at using condoms either. So he's got 5 kids, and he's just never really been there for any of them. Like, I've got 3 younger brothers. The youngest is now probably 17. The other 2 are probably like 28, 29. And I've spoken to them, and we're, especially the 28-year-old, we're like, why the fuck did our dad have kids? What was he thinking? He should have not bothered. But in many ways, that's also taught me a lot of lessons about how I want to be as a father and how I don't want to be as a father. So, doing that work before they come as well has been really important for me.
Yeah, well, thank you for doing that work and making sure that your choice to have a child is conscious, and that conception and the whole process is mindful. It sounds like you guys are doing that and having the hard conversations. And oh, wow, that story that you just told just lit me up. So that's wonderful. I'm curious about the conception aspect of having a child. There's a lot of different people that have a lot of different theories and ideas around what is a conscious conception. What does that look like, feel like, from a timing perspective, from what conversations need to be had, from even moon cycles and all of those types of things. I'm just curious, what have you guys spoken about the consciousness of the actual choice to have a child and when you're going to have one? Is that been something that you guys have discussed much at all, or where are you at with that?
I don't think we've quite got to the okay, what does a conscious conception look like? I think I don't think we've quite got there yet. I think it's one of those conversations that's maybe on the other side of the coil coming out and being like, okay, when would we really like it to happen? I think there's been already conversations around what's the energy that we want to cultivate when trying to conceive. So it's of love and passion and joy. I imagine that we'd probably love to bring some element of ritual in, to really be in the energy of what we are creating, what we are putting into the world, our intention and so forth. And that's just me kind of guessing based on how we've been in the past and who we often are as people together. We haven't quite got to the kind of final details of that yet, but I can imagine a real ritual you can create. And I imagine if I Google it, there's probably books on it, actually. Sure. I don't need to Google. There's probably books on it I can pick up. But there's also some of the conversations we have is I spoke to a friend of mine recently who went through IVF and hearing his story about, starting off with real intention. And he said, it got to the point for them that it was alarm clocks, alarms just going off and be like, okay, cool. It's this time in the day on this day, we need to have sex now. So I guess, and that thing you can't control, because we're both I'm 39 and my partner will be 30. I think she's 37 later this year. But it's that's also something that's part of the conversation as well, age, health, how we're looking after ourselves, how we're eating. So in terms of kind of conscious conception, I'd say that we probably have ideas in our head that we probably need to sit and have a conversation about to see whether there's vastly different ideas, or there's somewhere we want to go and do some learning, or maybe there might even be someone we get some coaching around that from somebody as well, potentially.
Yeah, absolutely. And you also mentioned the fear around, okay, having a child, which does that mean that you're not going to have sex with any other women now going forward? I'm curious about that part. Is that something that is forefront of your mind, or is that something that just kind of popped up while you were just exploring this conversation together today? Or is that something you guys have unpacked at all? Or what does that look like for you guys?
Yeah, I think it's I think for me, it's been alive as a conversation. It's not just been an easy conversation, as you can imagine. But we've been in a kind of closed relationship for the last 2.5 years. We've been in a monogamous relationship for the last 2.5 years. Bar some experiences when I went to ISTA last year around this time actually. just before maybe Mayish last year. It's been a monogamous relationship for the last couple of years. I think there's always a desire for me for sexual openness. I think that's quite, if I'm honest, that's who I am as a person. But, there'll definitely be between now and conception, or within 6 months, about 3 to 6 months of conception, no other sexual partners, potentially not even being near other people that are having sex as well. We haven't been to a sex club together yet. It's definitely something we've done a lot of talking about. But I imagine that, within, weeks and months of wanting to conceive, that's something that we might also not want to do probably from an energetic point of view.
Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah. One of the things that I was recently with my father and my grandfather, and we went on a trip. We went to Alaska and we were fishing, and it was the first time that my father and my grandfather and I had ever hung out, in our lives without women around or without other people. And it was a beautiful trip. And one of the things that I shared with my dad and my grandfather that just kind of popped out of my mouth was that the way that we treat our child has an impact on the way in which they'll treat us as we get to our own deathbed. And so I was thinking about that even in the context of the way in which we conceive through mindful conception, meaning, okay, let's go about this with the intention to create a child and to, I look at it from like, okay, behind the veil is these souls that want to come through and they want to come into this physical form and land in this 3D world, and they want to learn and they want to grow and they want to expand and whatever they want to do. And I just had this realization when I was talking to them that if every child or if every parent had that sort of awareness that the way that they create a child, even from conception, is the way that child will, respond on our own deathbed as they usher us, behind the veil again to return. I was like, we would live in a very different world with a lot less drama and trauma, right?
Because you'd be so like, okay, what do we want to call into our being, to ourselves, so that we can bring into the child as it's coming into the world? Is there some work? Is there some like deep personal work I need to do to like heal some of the stuff that's already there? So like that's not sitting inside the genetic makeup of my sperm when I release them. Do I need to like do a vision quest?
Mm-hmm.
Do I need to go to therapy, which I've been speaking to a therapist for 3 years. It's like, is there something I need to do to shift my own genetics and clear some of that stuff that's come before me out so that it doesn't carry on going any further? Like, that's a really powerful kind of idea to think about before you even think about a child. It's like, what work do I need to do now so that my child doesn't have to do this work later on?
Yeah, studying epigenetics, the Mark Wolin work, and what is invisible in our DNA that gets passed, to our children is such an important conversation. And for me, I do a lot of psychedelic work, but also a lot of trauma release work, and ensuring that my nervous system is, in a parasympathetic state, in a relaxed space, in that concept of conceiving. I would imagine that it's important to make sure that we're not all gunked up, because the nature of that conception and whatever is in that moment, I would assume has some impact on that sperm and that egg and the way in which it's, forming, and then therefore what's going to be, passed through in the genetics. So yeah, I love that you're saying that. It's just, it's something that I think about a lot too. So very cool. Very cool. So your partner, you guys work with other couples. Is that what I understand? And then also, how does that work? And when do you work in person with them? Do you do group work online? Do you, what is the format that you guys are working with right now?
So when me and also work with couples, they come to us, whatever the stuff is that they want to deal with, and we create a format where, depending on length of time, but we'll always do individual sessions with each of the partners. So all the couples we've seen are heterosexual couples. So I'll do a session with the man, I'll do sessions with the woman, and vice versa also does the same. And then we do joint sessions where all four of us are on online at the same time. And depending on the couple and how long they work with us, we'll have various iterations of that. And that's just a really simple format of it. We haven't been doing anything in person, but there's a lot of, we were like talking about, do we want to do like a couples retreat where we bring, a group of couples? Do we want to do individual couple retreats where, say, a couple comes to us and stays with us for like 4 or 5 days, and we do a similar kind of format? Like maybe I do some stuff with the man, and we go off and we hike and we talk about, leadership and adventure and, whatever. And maybe I go off with the woman and we might go into the forest and scream and shout or whatever. And we'll do stuff together. That's something that we kind of like cooking up in our minds. Like, how would that look? How would we want that to be? Because we can see that in-person element, something that, we're all really sorely missing. I know I'm definitely missing it, more of it. Like, in-person work is so powerful. Just because the Zoom is wonderful. Zoom and all the other kind of formats to connect are wonderful. But there's an energy of being in person that has a slightly more powerful transformational effect than just online. Like, online's great, but it is always going to be second to in person. And I think sometimes as people, we forget that because of the convenience of it. So it's like, I flew off to LA for a retreat, and some of my friends were just like, why would you do that? Why would you fly all that way to go on retreat? And I'm like, because it's important, Oh, wasn't it? Couldn't you do some of it online? I'm like, whoa. It's a whole different experience,
Yeah, I agree. I love that format. And I could see how powerful that would be to work individually with both, but then also go out in nature, go on an adventure, do whatever naturally emerges, and then coming back and then reconnecting, both you and your partner, and then obviously whatever couple you're working with. That just sounds wonderful, beautiful. And I'm curious, when you're working with, let's say, a couple and they are in the same space, let's say they're in a shared area, how do you energetically work with them? Like, what is some of the things that you take them through? What are the exercises and embodiment practices that really seem to get the most? I mean, obviously this is specific to the individual and why they're coming to you and what they're going through, but what are some of the things that you take them through that you found to be impactful?
So there's some common themes that we've seen with the couples we've worked with. Very common themes. 75% of the couples that we've worked with have been couples of mixed heritage. Like, where the man is black and the woman is white. That's been 75% of them, right? We've seen that, which is really interesting, obviously, because, that's our dynamic. The man is avoidant. The woman is anxious, which is exactly the same as our dynamic in our relationship, right? Exactly the same. So often the issues they're suffering from are things like communication, struggling to communicate and not argue, struggling to get out of arguments. Sometimes there's some intimacy issues that crop up, fear around emotions and being in emotional conversations. Those are some of the really common ones, particularly the communication. The communication piece is really important. And there's just a level of disconnection with them. So a lot of the practices we start a session with or in the session, some of it's just to regulate them. Like, regulate them alone, and then let's co-regulate you in a way that maybe you've never do before, not consciously, so that they come together and they are calm and they're able to be present with each other. And we'll take them through some pieces definitely around communications. Like, one of the best tools we find now is a Margot dialogue from the guys behind Margot, Hendricks, Harville Hendricks, and Helen. I never remember. She's got two.
Yeah, the Hendrickses. Yeah, I know them. I can't recall her name, but I do know them. So the Margot dialogue, like, is for a relationship where you struggle to communicate and listen to each other, that is like one of the single most transformational things that you can do. Because the biggest problem people have in their relationships is like, they're not actually listening to each other. They're listening to the story that they have about their partner. So they filter everything through the story. And the aim of the Margot dialogue in and of its own is to allow that story to melt away and you to listen to the words. So often we see huge transformational shifts inside a session with a couple where maybe one of them feels like they've been listened to for the first time.
they've been heard by their partner for the first time. They're able to say what's on their mind, what they're feeling, what they want, what they desire, any of those things. And for their partner to hear them as they're saying it in the way that they're saying it and reflect that back. And, I've seen couples just break down in tears and be like, this is the first time I felt like I've been heard, I've been listened to. So that's a really common one. There's a lot of breathing exercises, because it's accessible, it's easy to walk people through. And it shifts the state, but it also creates that co-regulation, which is so important, because so many couples is like, that's one of the biggest problems is they're dysregulated, I guess you could say it, right? They're out of regulation with each other, and they often come to each other to have conversations, and they're very dysregulated when having the conversations. So they don't have kind of full cognitive function, as I say.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of common things. We're taking through some tantric practices as well, often, to express, maybe they're going to do some embodiment practice just to express a desire through movement, or as type of energy that they want to bring to the relationship as well. There's a couple of really common things that we do. And sometimes we coach them. Like me and Orsa will sit, they'll be like, this thing is happening, what's coming up? And we'll just coach them, us two and them. And like, those are some of the like really powerful moments, because me and Orsa's coaching style is slightly different, and we see different things in the moment. It's like so little escapes, like the little movements, the turn away, all those tiny things, that the way that we disconnect from each other and we create conflict. It's like, do you see that? Stop. Did you see what you just did there? He said something really nice to you, and he said something really nice to you, and you turned it into a criticism. Can you see that? Tell me what he said to you. And then one partner might be like, oh, he said da 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 da. And then what did you say? You said this, 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 and this. In your head, you had it as a criticism. Did he say it? Was he critical of you? No. So if we hadn't been here, where would this have gone? Yeah. And maybe not sounding like we're shouting at them, but it's like, because we also get quite passionate because we have care for them. And in those moments, they're like, oh shit, this is like 50% of our arguments happen. Not because of what's being said, it's because of what we assume is being said, or we expect is being said.
Wow, I love that. So you're basically, what I'm hearing is you're holding the field for them to witness each other with observers, so that the energetics underneath the words are being shown to them in ways that they're not able to see within themselves, because they're just in their own relational drama or whatever it is that's happening. And then you're calling attention to it and inviting them to sit with the fact that they've created that into a criticism, when really it's not a criticism. In fact, it could have been a bid for connection, but they're receiving it energetically as something different because they're unwilling, or they're unable to see it as it is. They're seeing it through the lens of whatever their story is that they've created. Is that what I'm hearing? Yeah.
Exactly.
It's interesting that you share that, because I'm trained in internal family systems therapy, and I'm reading a book called Intimacy from the Inside Out. And basically in the book, it talks about how what we say to our partner is one thing, and then what we say in our head about this experience is another thing. And that's usually the split, where we have polarized parts, where part of us is saying, sure, honey, I'll take out the trash. Another part of us is saying, fuck, I'm not going to do the trash right now. What the hell are you asking me that for? Can't you see that I'm fucking busy at my computer, or whatever it is? And so these are those moments where it's like, okay, there's a polarized part. That's kind of the entry point for the work. And then what I'm also hearing is a little bit of, I love the Gottman work. The Gottmans are amazing. You got criticism, contempt, stonewalling, and contempt, the biggest predictors of divorce, and understanding that it's often not the words, it's the energetics that are really being communicated in each of those experiences. And then one of the things that I also find really fascinating and cool is the bids for connection with the Gottmans, which is something like 89% of the time, relational experts, couples that stay together for the long run, they meet each other's bids for connection. So it's a simple thing like, oh, look, honey, check out that beautiful bird over there. And you either look and you acknowledge and you squeeze that person's hand, or you say something, or you ignore them, right? And so if 9 out of the 10 times you ignore your partner's bid for connection, then likely you're headed towards divorce is what they say. And then for the couples that only meet their partner's bids for connection like 50% of the time, the Gottmans basically have predicted that there's a relational end, meaning that the relationship's going to come to an end. And so these are very simple tools that I think are very profound because it's science-based. They've been doing this research for 40 years. I was at the University of Washington in Seattle. They had the Love Lab there. So they would bring those couples in to have those conversations. And then they had them all, wired up with their heart rates. And even they would test the urine analysis to see what kind of stress hormones came through. And so it's really cool to see how science and psychology is kind of mixing. And it sounds like the work that you guys do is really helping people to, kind of penetrate what they can't see within themselves. So thank you for that. And then the other thing that I think is really fascinating about what you were sharing is just that you work with couples that are mixed race. I mean, how beautiful is that you're able to show, hey, this can actually work. Like we're a living embodiment as an example of what is possible. And I think that gives the world hope, because I come from the conclusion that, at the end of the day, we're how do I say this? At a soul level, we're all the same, right? But because of the programming, because of the cultural, everything that we've gone through over thousands of years of all of this gunk, there still is these challenges and issues with mixed race couples. And so I felt really lit up by the fact that that's who's coming to you guys 75% of the time. And I almost feel like that's just a beautiful, like little niche that you could carve out some radical hope in the universe. So thank you for that.
Yeah, we kind of we stumbled almost on it because it just kind of came up where we looked one day and we were like looking for. I remember going, oh man, we get a lot of mixed race couples we work with. And she's like, yeah, we do. And then we kind of looked at the form that we have that have everyone's names on it, and we were like, it's 75%, like almost bang on. Like wow, that's incredible, because say my personal coaching practice with men, I would say, God, I've never really put this down, but I say my coaching clients, I'd say 40% of them are like men of color, right? Which I guess is pretty high, but it's the same conversation I often have with the man who's nearly always been black and man in the couples coaching. Is they're like, one of the reasons why we chose you two is because I knew you would understand my experience. You would understand my experience to a level where I wouldn't have to explain too many things, right? And I could go as far as to say that, man, most of them, they were raised, most of the men, raised by their mothers. Fathers are absent to some degree at most. I know this is very common for a lot of people. Emotionally absent, weren't there in many ways that they wanted them to be, and so forth. But it's like uncanny that's like the profile. So, and it's funny, the challenges aren't necessarily based on the fact that they're a mixed race couple. There's been a few where there's been elements of like understanding culture, and that being something that's really important because, especially post George Floyd, which I think will literally be a phrase in history books and so forth, post George Floyd, because me and Orson met during that period. So, I always remember a day where she was like, are you okay? And I was like, man, I feel kind of sad. And she's like, why do you feel sad? And I was like, this stuff that's going on in the States, though it's not happening here in the UK, like, I get this. I understand this because this is part of the experience of me being alive. And she kind of stopped and was like, what do you mean? And I started to explain the various murders and killings and so forth. And she was like, if I'm really honest with you, like, I don't know anything about this. She's a white Swedish woman who spent 12 or 13 years in London with other white Swedish people mainly. And she was like, I don't really know about this. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, you don't really watch the news. Your friends are never going to talk about this because you're not talking about this at over champagne in some fancy restaurant, right? So she did. She went away and read a couple of books and, really read a couple of books and come back and ask questions and talk to my family about it and stuff like that. And there's been a couple of times that that's been super important in relationships, because it's easy to, inside of a mixed race relationship, to be like, oh, but they're just like me. Or, oh, I don't see color, like, inside the relationship, and just be like, oh, but, we're from the same place. It's like, well, no, they have a different experience to you, right? In the same way that I think it's really important for like men to understand women's issues. All the men I coach, I always tell them, like, I ask them questions like, do you understand like feminism, its roots, like what's it's trying to attain, the different waves? Do you understand what happened around Me Too and all these things? But I think it's really important in relationship that you strive to understand the cultural heritage of your partner, and in where you can embrace it, because that can be a huge source of contention, but it can also be a huge source of connection as well.
Wow. Thank you for naming all that. What a beautiful worldview, and I really, when you were talking at the very beginning, I was seeing sort of, mixed race intimacy coaching, sort of like 101, like what are the things that if you're out there and you've chosen to do this journey and you've fallen in love with somebody that's not of the same race as you, what are some of the things that may arise? What are some of the things that need to be discussed and talked about in order to actually understand each other's worldviews? Because, man, I feel like that's just a big one, a huge one, actually. And I've dated women that have been Black. I've dated women that have been Native American. I've dated women that have been Malaysian. So it's just interesting to have different perspectives. And certainly there's just a lot of blind spots, a ton of privilege, a ton of just not understanding, not feeling that I can understand them, and them feeling you just won't understand. You just will never understand. And those types of comments. And I'm like, well, I would love to know. I would love to figure that out, but also not feeling capable, or their willingness wasn't there. And so it was a struggle, to say the least. Just thank you. Thank you for doing that work. It's beautiful. So I want to shift gears a bit here. So the men you work with, I'm a men's coach. I work with men around erectile dysfunction and premature ejaculation and pornography and sex addiction and becoming multi-orgasmic and all of the things of shifting from mindless sexuality into more mindful. What is it that you specialize in? Who's coming to you? Why are they coming to you? How do you work with people, specifically men, and what results are you finding with the way in which you have your own unique approach? Like, where are you at and where are you going?
I say the men that I work with are really diverse, not just racially or culturally, but even in their problems. Like, because I work with men who, like in the dating realm, sometimes I work with men who are in relationships, and that's something they want to work on. Men come to around intimacy. I've worked with a few men around kind of erectile dysfunction and premature ejaculation before as well, or men who just sexually feel really low on confidence as well. And sometimes men come to me almost as like a very life coach, like their lives are disorganized and they want to create more structure and organization to hit their goals. And what I'm often finding is really coaching is a journey of self-awareness. It's a real journey of like learning about self. Like often people come with a problem. Like say, for instance, a really common problem at the moment is, I'd say there's two really common kind of issues, type of men I've been working with mainly at the moment. This probably takes up like 60% of my practice. The first one is men who are anxious in dating. They're very anxious men. They get anxious around dating, a lot of overthinking. Like will stop them from going on dates, that will cause them when they're on dates to be very quiet and very shy and not speak and not be able to create the sort of connection they want. And then the second type of man that's coming to me, and these men are almost one of my favorites to work with, is men who are avoidant. So they can be either in relationship or single. And they're avoidant men are often, if they're single, they are meeting people and finding all the reasons why that person isn't right, looking for all the faults and finding all of them, and hyper-focusing on faults and problems. not being able to express their emotions, being afraid of intimacy, but not knowing it's fear of intimacy. So they push partners away. Something happens, doesn't go the way they want. They close down, they go inward, and they withdraw in some way, whether that's emotionally, physically, or mentally. And I've been working with those men inside of those avoidant men inside of relationship and single, and that's an interesting one because that's the reality that I came from very much and still have to fight against. But with the anxious men, a lot of that is about looking at the stories that they tell themselves. Because a lot of the anxious men, often is what happens is that they've come to an idea around who they are, right? That limits their idea of who they are, is limiting. It's like, okay, women don't find me I'm not attractive. It's a very simple belief that kind of sits under. So if I'm believing I'm unattractive, then when I'm on dating apps, I'm going to feel sad. I'm going to feel low. I'm not even going to really want to engage. I'm going to feel very hopeless. So all the energy of all of those emotions is coming out in your swiping, is coming out in their messaging. And when they go on dates, it comes out in their dates because they're also overthinking. So they're worrying about what they're going to say. They're trying to look a certain way to be accepted. And all that creates a barrier of a lot of silence and quietness and a lack of deep emotional connection, especially. So with them, what I'm seeing the results with them is over the course of some sessions is getting them out a bit more, questioning the thinking, helping them learn to question their own thinking, which is a really important part. Helping them learn to question their own thinking so that when they come up with these thoughts and ideas of I'm not good enough, I'm not attractive, or various flavors of that, they can stop and start to think, okay, do I actually have evidence for this? Is this true? Did this just happen once when my auntie told me that the trousers I was wearing were stupid? Or is this really something that's actually happening in front of me all the time? And, that starts to shift how they're thinking, starts to shift who they're being in their lives. They start to become more confident. They start to want to take on more of life. They start to have other effects that trickle into other areas other than their dating lives, right? So they start to have more dates. They start to have better dates. There's more connection in their dating lives, right? They start meeting women who are a lot more on their wavelength because they start getting clear on the sort of woman that they want and relationship they want because they feel confident in dating. But then they're also telling me they're oh, I got a promotion at work. People at work are telling me that I'm being more straight and direct with what I want or how I think I'm giving my opinions at work more, I'm driving forward, or they suddenly start to realize that they've got more ambition and they're like, oh, actually, I don't like this job. I'm only in this job because I didn't think I could get anything better. And we're like, okay, so what would you like to do? So they're shifting jobs and moving into careers that they really enjoy. So though they might come to me for around dating, my conversations are never constrained to that. So they start to shift various aspects of their life. And this, what I'm about to say now, is something I see across the board, a shift and change in all my clients, right? Their relationship with their parents improves. Almost every one of my clients over the last year and a half, through hard conversations, not necessarily directly, but over the course I've worked with them, their conversations they have with their parents are better, the communication is better as well, the level of boundaries is a lot more towards what they want. And then we've got the other side of the men, right? The avoidant man. And why I love the avoidant man is because, again, this is an experience I've had, right? Being avoidant of intimacy, of connection, of emotions. Because especially the emotional work creates so much profound change. When we do the emotional work to identify our sensations in our body as energy patterns, identify them as in words and language or embodiment or sound. I don't always constrain them to that. Sometimes I'll be like, what are you feeling? And I'm feeling this sensation here. If that sensation had a sound or a movement, what would it be? And they might do something and I'm like, so, and I might reflect you're like a cat jumping out of a pen in excitement. They're like, yeah, that's it. And then we might give some words to that. And they start to do this regularly. They start able to communicate with people much better and start to really forge their relationship based on how they're feeling and what they want to feel as well. And then, the avoidant man also has the intimacy issue about moving forward towards intimacy. And for some of that, we have to kind of delve a little bit into their childhood. What were your parents like? What was your father like? And stuff like that. and they start to see some similarities, like, oh shit, yeah, my dad was really distant. And when they argued, my dad would always walk away and not want to talk about it and so forth. And it's like, yeah, and getting conscious to that and practice. Like a lot of the work is practice. You know, it's not like we have one conversation and everything is healed. It's the continual practice of coming, having conversations, taking actions, looking at who you're being, looking at your thought processes, and why they keep kind of getting locked in certain loops, levels of compassion as well. But, you know, not looking at, because I think dating coaching often is very much seen as like, they're going to come to me and I'm going to say this, say that, say this, and do this, and you're going to get more dates. And that really is only about 5% of what I do with people. And some of my clients, I don't do that at all. Some of my clients I work with around dating, I've never seen their dating profile. Not once. They've changed it based on the conversations that we've had, but I've never needed to see it. They just like, oh man, I can see where I'm not actually talking about who I am. I'm being bland and boring. Yeah. Okay. Let's polarize. Like, who are you? And put it into the world. And through that, again, massive shifts in their dating life. So, you know, with that work, I love that. I really enjoy the dating work, the relationship stuff. And also there's like I said, there's the stuff around kind of general life coaching, people wanting to be more organized and so forth. Because, you know, for some people, they're super disorganized, and that's sometimes the root of a lot of their problems. They just forget everything. But then we also get into like, what's the thoughts you have about this? Like, if someone says to you, hey, we're going to meet next week at 5 p.m. on a Tuesday, what's the thoughts that you have about ensuring that happens? And sometimes it's nothing. Like, there's no thought pattern. You're like, okay, cool. Oh, I just think that I'll remember it. Okay, cool. Why do you think that? Like, why have you believed still that that's, you know, what's your resistance to putting things on paper or using a diary? And we start to see that there's like, you know, one of my clients, we uncovered that below a lot of his actions is a fear of being boring. His fear, he's afraid that he will be boring. So he's doing all these things in his life because he wants to appear interesting and fun to other people. And perversely, he's creating his life to be really boring because he gets locked in the same cycles of stress and boredom. And it's like, so the thing you're running away from by doing all these things is creating the thing that you don't want. And, you know, and he's like, fuck, like, how did we get from looking at my weekly plan to realizing that I have a deep fear of being boring? And I'm like, well, this is the work, because it's not just about putting stuff in the plan. It's about what's happening underneath in your psychology a lot of the time, and in your body as well. You know, when you get into like the somatics and the regulation, what's happening there that's impacting all these areas of your life.
Wow. Amazing. Wow. Yeah. So anxious and avoidant, there's a lot of differences in how we work with those types of men, but I love that you can work with both and that you do work with both. And I would assume that working with the avoidance has impacted and helped you in your own way of relating to your partner, meaning that, and this is a question, and it's also maybe an observation within myself, but do you notice this within yourself when you're helping a man to outgrow certain behaviors, that it impacts yourself positively too? And so the way in which you show up for your partner also is less avoidant? Like, do you feel that to be true? I mean, because I feel it, so I'm just curious, like, what your journey is with that.
Yeah, when I work with an avoidant man, the number of times I'll get off a call from speaking to him and be like, also, you know, I realize, and sometimes it's not an apology or an acknowledgement. It's like, I realize that when you do this thing, I react in this way sometimes, and I don't mean to. And I've just really had a reflection from a conversation I'm having with one of my clients around, like, I don't know, you tell me you're going to bed, for instance, right? And I go, yeah, I'll be there in a minute. And then I sit in the front room on my phone usually for like 10 minutes, and then I come to bed. I'm unconsciously realizing that, like, I don't really need to do that. And that 10 minutes is like 10 minutes that we could be spending lying down together, cuddling or whatever. And it's almost like, because I then have that 10 minutes on my own, I'm like, oh, I have space to myself. Like, oh, I'm free. But actually, I don't really even get to really spend that time being free because I'm on my phone. I'm just, you know, scrolling and looking at emails that I don't need to look at again. And sometimes it's like, yeah, it kind of shifts and changes my behavior and my way of being from coaching them and seeing their own actions. Because a lot of the times, like, there's, with all coaching, I said, it's a big fucking mirror being put up right for you as the coach of like, where is this in your life? Where are you doing this thing in your life or having these sorts of thoughts in your life? And maybe, as one of my spiritual mentors says, she's like, she said to me, you're not working with like great boulders and rocks that you need to move out your way anymore, right? You've done a lot of the heavy lifting. She's like, now it's the grains of sand in your shoe that you could easily not notice. But when you really pay attention to how you're walking, you can feel how that grain is rubbing one part of your foot, and you can take off your sock and you can look very closely and you can pick it up and see it and take it away. He's like, it's the grains of sand now that we're working with. And I see that a lot with my coaching.
I love that. Yeah, it's such great self-awareness. And I like how your mentor framed that, the big rocks versus the grains of sand. And I think what comes up for me around that is your humility, because here it is, you're being confronted with working with your client. Are we just the wounded healer that's telling our clients what to do, but we're actually not taking those steps in our own life? And then are we just living a hypocritical life, which, you're sharing is no, coaching somebody is the biggest mirror to you doing your own work. And I found that to be the same thing, because here we are we the living embodiment of the men that we coach? Because ultimately the way I look at it is, if a man wants to come and work with me, ultimately, he's coming to me because he has a problem. He's got a porn addiction, or he's got some sort of sexual dysfunction, or he wants to date or whatever. But at the end of the day, what they're really investing in is they're investing in whether or not they look up to us, meaning that the frequency that we emanate from is something that they aspire to be in one or many aspects of their life. And so as we begin to show up in our humility and in our honesty with our partner, or whoever it is in our life, then that's a frequency that is like no bullshit. And that's why people actually trust us and then say, okay, yeah, I would be willing to invest in myself, and I want you to be the one to guide me. And so I think that that's a beautiful aspect to coaching that a lot of people don't talk about. So it sounds like you obviously get it.
Yeah. And I think it's one of those parts as well. When people want coaching from someone, we often think of what can they do for us and how much is it going to cost, right? Especially that second one. Like, people will just say, how much is your coaching? And I always say to people, I'm like, what are you paying for? And they're like, well, I don't know. And I'm like, well, why are you asking me? You're asking me a price, right? For a thing you don't know what you're paying for, right? You wouldn't go, it doesn't make sense in that way, right? You wouldn't walk around the world going in that way, like asking for prices of things that you don't know what they entail. But it's like, what people are coming for is an energetic experience in many ways of, like you said, of the frequency that you hold that helps raise them up out of the frequency they're in, right? Into a new frequency that they want to embody. And that's the kind of like, a lot of men don't get that when you kind of you kind of explain that to them, right? But that's like the space holding. Like, the space holding almost can lift someone up, into a new way of being, into new choices, into a higher state of consciousness. And all we've done is sit and have conversation that doesn't necessarily seem particularly profound, right? But it will question someone's way of being enough to lift them out of like, oh, I'm just worrying about what everyone thinks of me all the time, into, oh, how do I want my life to be? What sort of life do I want to live? Because you can't sell someone's not going to understand. Like, I'll take you out of being anxious about what other people think and fear of judgment into thinking more about who do you want to be, what life do you want to live, and how do you want to show up in your life and your relationship, right? But that shift there, that's fucking priceless. Like, that changed your whole life. Like, if someone could bottle that for, $9.95, like, they'd be a fucking billionaire. But the problem always is, and it's not a problem for all people, that energetic shift also requires the client, the man, to bring an energy to the sessions that allow him to rise up it's not just a one-way thing of me giving energy. You also have to come on the ride to shift your energy upwards as well.
I love that. Yeah, because marketing for the most part has been, hey, I specialize in this little niche, and this is why I think I'm coming to you, because I can attract a mate, and that's what I'm paying for, and therefore you're going to help me to find, a girlfriend or, a boyfriend or whatever it is. And what I'm hearing you say is no. You think you're coming to me for that particular reason. You're asking me what the price is, but actually what we're really talking about here is a whole up-leveling of your consciousness, so that every aspect of your human life and your human journey is now elevated. And so you're going to be able to attract and magnetize not just new potential partners to you, but all things career-related, financial, partnership related, vacations, anything that is really, really important to you, even purpose. That's really the journey that people are going on when they invest in somebody like ourselves who understand it on that sort of level, as opposed to just solution based. Oh, I'm going to help you fix this one little thing, right? Because that's the way that most people are sold to. And so that's probably why they're asking that question. Like, well, David, how much does it cost to work with you?
Yeah. It's, they see it as a time, and this is no one's fault because this is how we often live. It's like a time exchange. I'm going to give you my time and you're going to give money for my time. But it's like, I kind of joked also about this. I was like, no one's paying me to think about my client at 7:30 at night when I'm watching a Netflix episode about something and I see something that's going to be useful to them and what they're dealing with. And then in that moment, I send them a WhatsApp and go, hey, there's this TV series I think you should really watch. Or when I wake up, and this has happened to me before, I wake up in the middle of the night and I go to the toilet and I suddenly go, shit, that conversation I had with them, this is the thing they need to know. Okay, cool. Go to my phone in the middle of the night. I might not send the message, but I will write it down in a calendar entry. So I send it in the morning. It's like, you're not paying for that, right? If you're thinking time exchange for money, but this is part of the container that you're in, is that I'm thinking about this, right? And what's going on with you when we are not even speaking. I'm trying to think about the best that's best for you when we're not even talking. Like some of my clients, I might be talking to, like a friend of mine was talking about events in London. And he was like, oh, I'm going to this event. I was like, you went to this event? Yeah. What other events do they do? What's the website? And I went there and I swooped through and I was like, yeah. One of my clients, he's in a ethically non-monogamous relationship and he wants to connect with more men and women who are in ethically non-monogamous relationships. So I was like, oh, great. Here's like 5 events for him. Boom. Listed that up, sent him an email with all those. And it's like, okay, he's not paying me in the time exchange. If he was doing time exchange, he's not paying for that because that's just me arriving and talking. This is me giving you my energy in between the times that we
Absolutely.
speak.
It's cool that you share that, because with all the clients that I work with, I usually work in 12-week blocks, but I give, we exchange signal numbers and I'm basically on call because most of them are coming to me for accountability in some level. And so I say, hey, I might not get back to you right away within the first, like 12 hours, but I will get back to you. And most of the time I respond fairly regularly or fairly, within a few hours, depending upon my schedule. But being able to go back and forth where yes, there's a coaching container and there's a professionalism here, but there's also a degree of friendship and care where it's like, no, I actually want you to come into the best version of who you can become. And if that means going on a website and sending over some non-monogamous like festivals or conferences that you find, or for me, same thing, because I wake up and have a dream about one of my clients and I go, oh my God, I just had a dream. I'm going to send it to them because that's the level of care that it sounds like you and I both emanate from. And that's ultimately what people are signing up for is, oh my gosh, I actually am worthy of receiving somebody's love and care, not just that I'm paying them money and then they're just coaching me. They actually care about me. And then that's a new thing for them. And that ends up being a vibration that they carry into their life towards whoever it is that they're in relationship with or however they're running their business. So yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. It's like there was one small example. One of my clients recently, he sent me a message asking me a question. And he was apologizing for asking the question and some other sorts of apologies in and around there for just asking me a question. And I replied to him. I said, I'm going to ask you a question. I was like, but I want you to reply. I want you to send me this question again and remove the apology, right? Remove any apologizing because you have the right to ask me a question, right? And I want you to just ask me the question straight. And he was like, oh. I was like, yeah.
I love it.
And he was like, okay. And then he sent me the message, and the answer to the question was yes. I was like, yes. I was like, but how did it feel for you sending those 2 messages, right? And he was like, the second one was so much more effortless. And I was like, yeah. So where else where do you do this most commonly? This was like in a WhatsApp back and forth. I was like, where's the areas of your life where you do this most commonly? Like, you apologize for asking a question. He was just like, oh man, whenever I'm in a group of people and I'm speaking and they have to listen to me. And I was like, you deserve to be heard. Do you understand? And it was like, and he was like, oh man, yeah, okay, yeah. And so it's like, sometimes there's impromptu coaching that happens like midway between, or people contact me and they're like, shit, something's happened, I'm feeling like this. And I'm like, okay, cool. Like, I got half an hour later on today. Do you want to have a quick chat? Like, it's not just an energetic exchange. As I joked with one of my clients said this to me. He was like, you're like the best surrogate friend I could ever ask for.
I love it.
And I was like, we kind of laughed. I was like, that's quite funny. It's like, yeah, that's the sort of level of relationship that you try and cultivate.
Yeah. Yeah, I resonate with that. I mean, I love my clients. Like, I deeply care about them. So it's this interesting relationship where there's that exchange, but there's so much care and love that goes into that. I mean, I don't hold anything back. It's not like, okay, you're paying me for coaching and I'm only going to bring 85% of my wisdom, but hey, once we get to this level, I'm going to upsell you into the next level. And then you're going to have to pay again in order to do another 12-week container. And we're going to get you really close, but we're not going to go all the way. No, fuck that. It's like, if you're going to pay me, I'll give you 110%. I'll give you everything that I possibly can in that amount of time. And we'll get as far as we possibly can. And that's just the nature of who I am. And it sounds like you are the same way. And I think that we need more people as coaches, therapists, guides, shamans, whoever, to emanate from that frequency, because it's love. It's abundant. There's no need to withhold anything in the journey of helping people to come into the best version of who they are. And I love that we can kind of geek out on this.
Yeah. And I think sometimes coaches get a really bad rap, right? Because I'm going to say this. It's a bit like, it's a bit like men, right? Most men are really good, decent men, right? And they don't mean to do any harm in the world. And a lot of them never really do any harm, right? But there's a handful per 1,000 or whatever, I don't know what the statistics, I'm sure many people disagree with me, of men who do bad things, right? And even I'd say a good proportion of those men, they don't consciously want to do bad things. There's a lot of unconscious stuff that's going on for them, right? And I think it's the same with coaches. Like, everybody can tell, like, so many people can tell you a horror story about a friend of a friend of a friend had with a coach, right? Oh, they signed up to some program and the coach it wasn't actually the coach that showed up. It was a coach's friend, that like the coach's mentees and blah, blah, blah. So sometimes people have a really bad opinion of the coaching industry. And it's interesting because I'm like, man, I know so many coaches who are amazing, loving, caring people where they're thinking about their clients when I'm having a conversation with them. We're at dinner talking and they say something to me like, oh, one of my clients is struggling with this. And I'd be like, and they might go, what do you think? Is this something you've seen before? And I'm like, yeah, actually it is actually. And some of my clients have done da-da-da-da-da-da. And they're like, oh, can I just record this? I'm like, yeah, record this. And then they might record it and then they type it up and they send it to their client to help their client. It's like, we're having dinner, we're having lunch, and they're still thinking about their clients. But people have this idea that like clients are crooks and they're trying to take, and, the same thing with, like online programs or any programs like that. It's like, oh, how's this person trying to scam me and take from me? And it's like, that isn't happening half as much as, and this is very honest, what happens more is people showing up to stuff, whether that's coaching, individual, or coaching programs, and giving minimal percent effort and not showing up to really like give it their effort of like, I'm going to make this life-changing for me. There's so much of that, right? Like, not to bag on people, like if you're listening to this, but it's like, if you've done work, whether it's with a coach, whether it's an online program or anything, and you haven't got the results you wanted to get, the first question you should ask is, did I put in the effort required to get the results that I wanted to get? Right? But we're very quick to say that something's wrong before we've put the effort in to actually make it a success. Whether that be this is a common thing, right? Relationships, careers, friendships. But it's easier to blame the other person and say, oh, it's not good. They're not good. They're bad. It's just to have the awareness. And it's not a kind of self-judgment. There's like a lovely spot that sits between like self-judgment and self-berating. There's like where there's a self-awareness, neutrality, like a neutral level of self-awareness of going, do you know what? I did not put the effort in required to make that thing happen. And do you know what? In the future, or what if I do this again, or from tomorrow, I'm going to shift gears. And it's not from a place of like, oh my God, I'm such a terrible human being. Look how useless I am. But it's also not from a place of like, oh, none of this is my responsibility. It's from the place of like, I'm responsible and I can make a change here. And I'm going to look to the future and not kind of bog myself down in my badness and my uselessness.
I love that. I love that you just name that, because I find that to be true as well. And I think that that's why there is a price tag on things, because I've noticed that when people don't put enough skin in the game, they often don't show up to do their own work. The price tag goes up a little bit, and all of a sudden they take it more seriously. And that's an interesting aspect to the human journey and the human condition, which is that we take our work more seriously when we actually put in some of our own value, because we worked hard for that money. And therefore now we are investing in ourselves. Are you going to actually show up for that? One of the things that's interesting about men in general, so I've been studying this for quite some time, but one of the things I talk to men about is why do men invest in personal development? And basically there's 10 specific reasons why they do. So, and those are in no particular order, but I kind of put them in this order because I found it to be, this is the order when I talk to men, but it's make money, save time, save effort, get out of jail, whether it's an addiction or a relational issue, to get fit, some health related thing, to have more sex or better sex, or to attract a partner at all. And then the last two, which I think are probably the most important, but the least that people invest in them, is spiritual development and purpose. And so, yes, there are other reasons why men invest in personal development, but for the most part, that's why people are coming to invest in a therapist, a coach, or some form of a holistic practitioner to work with. What I find is interesting, though, is that for people like yourself who treat the individual as a whole, people like myself who treat people as a whole, not just solving one problem, is that all of those aspects of their life actually up level, meaning that everything improves if they are willing to actually do the work and to put in that courageous effort of, one, not just saying, yes, hey, I would love to work with you, David, but the actual willpower to sign the contract and actually send over the payments and actually show up to the calls. Because saying yes is one thing. The willpower to take action is a completely different thing. And so when I'm on calls with men and we're exploring working together, a couple things that I do is I say, hey, this is how much it costs. This is the 12-week container. Here's what you get, 90-minute calls, schedule it in the calendar. And I'm not going to let you make this let you make this decision today. Even though you say you want to work with me, sleep on it. Sleep on it for a few days, sleep on it for a week. If you still want to do this, you'll be just as jazzed in a week's time. In fact, you might even be more jazzed. But I'm not going to do any weird NLP language trickery or shaming you into the pain point that like brought you here to this moment. Like, go sleep on it. And then all I ask is be respectful. Come to me and tell me either yes or no. And if you're going to do that, don't just say yes, then actually sign the contract and take the steps and step into the willpower to actually show up to those calls and allow for me to guide you. Because ultimately that's what you're investing in. And so that's kind of the way that I frame things now. And it's really working well because in my mind, it's a loving, ethical way to do the sales process. And then I also say to men, and here's the thing, if you choose not to work with me for whatever reason, I trust that you know what's best for yourself and the money that you're investing right now. And therefore your dollars need to go to some other place or some other experience. And nothing changes between you and I. I still care about you. You're not dead to me because all of a sudden you chose not to invest in yourself. We're still good. And if you want to come back later and have a conversation or send me a message and tell me how things are rolling, I would love to receive that. And I find that way, that approach to working with individuals has been the most elevating to my own business and the smoothness of the transaction to do deep work, because they don't feel manipulated into the sale. And that's also what happens in the coaching industry that's just perverse, and it's extractive and it's predatory, and it can get really culty in a lot of ways. So anyways, I'm on a little tangent there, but I figured I'd throw that in.
No, but I the way I'm not too dissimilar from you actually. When someone comes to me for coaching, right, what it's like for them as an experience is they usually contact me in some way, Instagram, email, that kind of jazz. And I don't try and get them on a phone call straight away, really. I'm like, what's going on with you? Like, what's going on? Tell me a bit about you, right? Like, why do you think, sometimes I ask people like, why do you think I can help you, And the first conversation I have with men has a very similar pattern. It's like, we get on the call, and I make it clear to you this is a safe space to share, right? You can share whatever you want. I'm not judging you because I've heard it all. Like I've heard all sorts of things, man, from people, what's going on in their lives and all the different areas of all the extremes you can think of. And then I just say, hey man, I don't even say this. I'm just like, I say that it's a safe space, and then they talk. And usually a minimum they talk for 15 minutes. And I've had calls where men have just kept on talking for an hour and a half. An hour and a half, they have barely paused, and they're like, get to the end, and they're like, oh my God. Like, I've said a bunch of stuff there that I've never said to anyone else because I never really felt like anyone was listening to me. And you're listening to me, and I can feel you're listening to me by what you ask me and the questions you ask. And like yourself, I was like, I don't need to manipulate into working with me, but I also, one of the things I like to do is I wanted to see that you're willing to just do a bit of work in between. Are you willing to do some work? Because what I found is the people who, they love a phone call, right? They love to talk and hear the things, the insights and stuff. But are you willing to put those insights into action, in shifting the ways of being and who you are? And as soon as I can see that in somebody, I'm like, let's do this then. We can make magic happen, right? Because if you're willing, right, and you're committed, I'm committed because I'm here, right? Then we can make magic happen. And if you stay committed, I'm staying committed. I'm going to hold you to your commitment and accountability, right? Let's do this. But if people say no, like yourself, I'm like, cool, man. You don't want to do it? That's no problem. But, I'll check in on you every so often just to see how things are going, see if things are improving. I might send you a podcast from time to time. I think will be good for you to listen to, because maybe I don't hear from you and stuff like that. And it's like, because I care, I want your life to be better. We've had a conversation, we've got a connection. I'm not just trying to get money out of you. I don't need to, there's no joy for me in just like being around extracting money from people. Well, that's just not, I don't want to run a business like that at all. Even though you see how that could be a more financially successful way to run a business, right? But ethically, I don't want to manipulate people by poking their pain points because it makes them feel shit and then it makes them open their wallet. Like I want to inspire people to change. I want to inspire you into the life that you want to live and the experiences you want to have, and have that what propels you. Maybe you came in the door because of the pain, right? But I want you to walk through the door, right? Because you feel inspired to what you can create and how you can start to live.
Love it. Love it. Wow. You and I are very similar. I'm so glad that we're having this conversation. David, we're probably coming to the end of this, I would assume. It's been a beautiful conversation. But lastly, so this is your podcast. You have all your listeners out there. They've just listened to you for whatever amount of time this is going to be. We've come to the end. What message do you have for your listeners about this journey of building this experience, doing the podcast, or just in general, what message do you have for them to leave them something that really comes from you, the creator of this authentic experience of coming alive?
Big question. It's not about knowledge. It's not about what you know. We all often get bogged down in like, I need to know more. And I kind of learned this through the podcast, actually, if you're doing the podcast or speaking to guests. It's more about what you're willing to bring and to share about who you are as a person, you know? And this is across the board, right? And that's why I say it's not about the knowledge. It's like, you know, in dating, in relationships, in intimacy, in your life in general, it's so easy for us to get bogged down in like, I need to know more, to do more. It's like, if we bring more of ourselves, we start to experience that we've got a lot more innate knowledge in ourselves. And also, we also get to hear other people's, and we don't get so bogged down in like needing to know how things need to be or how they should be. And I've seen that through creating a podcast. Like, I've spoken to some incredibly knowledgeable people like yourself, and the voice often in my head is like, oh, you're not good enough. You don't know enough. And it's never stopped me from having good podcast episodes. It's not about knowledge. It's about how much of myself and my experience and my curiosity I'm willing to bring to the rest of the world.
Wow. Love that. Yeah. Permission to not just accumulate knowledge for the sake of knowledge, but really to, what I'm hearing is to lead with vulnerability and to expose yourself and to take that first step and then see what happens with the world and the universe. See if other people also respond in their own vulnerability to have shared, authentic, real relating like what we did today. So thank you. Thank you, David, for being on your own podcast. That was beautiful. I loved it. It was so inspiring. I learned so much about you. Now I know, I mean, you had me on and you asked me all the questions. Now I know what you do, so that when I meet men that would be better to work with you, I'll just be like, yeah, you need to see my man, David Chambers over here. So that was really cool. Really appreciate it. So any last words here for your audience?
No, nothing really. I guess everyone knows where to find me, the standard stuff. But where do the listeners find more of Tyson Adams?
Appreciate it. Just on Instagram and Facebook, Tyson Adams. That's really where I'm at. My website's not quite built. And so just find me there and DM me, just like what you're saying, David. I love it. Just let's start a conversation. Who the hell are you? Why are you talking to me? Let's chat. So love all that. Really appreciate you. And, thank you for allowing me to be back on to interview you. That was really fun.
All right. Man. Thank you. It was a pleasure. It's great to have conversations with you. So I guess listeners, this very special episode, first of a kind for the podcast. Thank you for listening. And until next week, people. I want to say a big thank you for listening. It's people like yourself that really help get the podcast out into the world, especially if you're often sharing the episodes and the podcast with people that you feel just could do with listening, right? Can see a different way of being a man, maybe a different way of having dating lives and intimacy and relationships. So I want to say a big thank you. And if maybe after listening to this episode, you think, oh, there's someone actually who could really do with this, please share it with them, share the love. I'm really, really grateful. And if, you want to get in contact with me for any questions, or you want to talk about coaching or any working together, feel free to reach out to me on Instagram @theauthenticman_, or you can email me hello@theauthenticman.net. Thank you very much.